Beyblade has been around for over 25 years, and in that time, we've seen hundreds of different releases across 4 distinct generations. And in this video, we're going to be opening up a Beyblade from every single one of them. So hit that like button, hit subscribe to join the Nook Nation, and now let's talk about our first Beyblade from the very first season of Beyblade with Dragoon F. I was able to get a brand new Unboxed Dragoon F from Japan, or at least I hope it's brand new. I bought this like 3 or 4 years ago, and I never checked to see if it was new, so hopefully I didn't get scammed. But looking at the box art, it's pretty crazy to see how many elements have changed, but also how much of the box art DNA still exists in modern Beyblade. There's just so many different colors and fonts and designs, and it's really unique compared to what we get today. And I'm glad that for Beyblade X's 25th anniversary crossover project, where they remake older generation bays in the latest system, they're bringing back that box design. Like, looking at Drigger, you can see that even though the shape of the box is different, they kept those central design elements. And this kind of callback to the older box design is even applied by Hasbro as well, just a little bit more modern. On the very front of the box, you have the A25 product code, you have the name at the very bottom, you have Tyson or Takao, depending on which translation you like, and on the back, you have the individual parts and the stats. So just off of the few things that I've mentioned, you can see how some of these elements still exist today. And something that I kind of forgot, and maybe some of you guys forgot as well, is that this older generation of Beyblade is basically a model kit to a certain degree. That definitely changed throughout the 25-year-long history of the series. I don't think model kit bays would really make sense today, but it's interesting how you had to kind of clip and trim off the little plastic pieces, kind of like a Gundam. You had to assemble the Beyblade. This video is all about bays from every single generation. But if you guys want to get some of the latest X Beyblades, go and check out sponsor of the channel, Mall of Toys. They have a bunch of releases up for sale right now, like Cobalt Dragoon and Phoenix Rudder, and they're also doing pre-orders for the upcoming El Drago remake and the new Whale Wave. So go and check out Mall of Toys, links in the description down below, and make sure you use code ilinnuc to get you 5% off of your first purchase. So now let's actually talk about the Beyblade itself with Dragoon F. I will say I'm not the biggest expert on Plastic Gen Beyblade. I was not a fan whenever this bay came out because I was 2 years old. I was a little bit too young for that. Looking at the parts, let's start off with the attack ring, which is called Dual Dragon. Dual Dragon is a 2-piece, 4-bladed design. There is the main white plastic piece on top, and then there is a smaller red ring that kind of just snugly fits on the underside. And interestingly enough, this is the only 4-bladed shape that we're talking about in this video, because future generations really like their 3-bladed attackers for the main character base for some reason. So Dragoon is just kind of unique like that. Next up, we have the weight disc, which is called 8 wide. And for all the Plastic Gen fans out there, how do you look at a weight disc and just know what it's called? I know you could say that about literally every other generation of Beyblade, but something about weight discs have just always confused me. The following parts of the bay just kind of go hand in hand together, but for the spin gear, we have the left spin gear, which just kind of enables the spin direction of the Beyblade. Another unique point about Dragoon is that it's the only left spin bay in this entire generational lineup. And then finally, we have the blade base, which is called Phantom Grip Base, which has a pretty brightly red colored rubber attack tip. Overall, Dragoon F is a fun and pretty classic design, although it seems to kind of be forgotten about, especially when you compare it to the more popular Dragoon models like S, V2, and GT. Now let's move on to the next generation with Metal Fight Beyblade. Originally launched in 2008 in Japan and getting a Western 2010 release, this was the series that really brought in metal Beyblades. I know there was HMS, okay, but that was kind of a failure, but this is the true start of metal bays. And the Beyblade from this generation we're going to be opening is Storm Pegasus, used by main character Jinga Hagane. I will say I do have to be transparent about something. This is not an official Takara Tomy release. It's actually what is called a mid-fake. I made a video about mid-fakes close to 2 years ago, which some people really didn't like. But in that video, I just kind of talked about how a lot of sellers were listing these as genuine for really good prices, and that's just not true. Although mid-fakes are definitely better than the kind of garbage, rapidity stuff that you may have seen way back when, they're still not official Takara Tomy. They're like 85 to 90% as good. I'm not advocating for them. I'm not saying you should go and buy some or whatever, but do your own research. I really wanted to open up an official Takara Tomy Storm Pegasus, but these things are like 13, 14 years old, and getting one that is new in box is just really expensive. But let's go ahead and open up the box, and the first thing we're going to look at is going to be the included blue string launcher. I never actually got the Takara Tomy version of Storm Pegasus, so I never got this cool lighter blue Jinka aesthetic string launcher, so I'm glad to have one, even if, you know, it's not official. But after that, we have the actual Beyblade itself. And first up, we're going to look at the little tool that comes with pretty much every single Metal Fight Beyblade. One of the biggest things about the design of this generation was the face bolt. All of these pieces would just kind of screw in together, and you needed a wrench-like tool to be able to take it apart, put it together, and to even swap what tip you're using. And speaking of tips, let's look at the performance tip, which is rubber flat. And this is where mid-fakes can kind of fall apart sometimes. This one just looks kind of off. I mean, it has a bit of a slant to it, like it wasn't really seated properly. And there's also one part of the rubber flat that looks mushed down, or is that even like, is that a fingerprint? There might be a fingerprint on this. It's not great, and an official one would definitely be better, but I have definitely seen worse mid-fake rubber flats though. I've seen some pretty crazy ones. It's not bad. Next up, we have the spin track, which is called 105. And the 105 number just kind of tells you what height the Beyblade is at. The lowest spin track, I think, is either 80 or 85. So this is definitely towards the lower end. Now we can move on to the actual meat of the Beyblade itself. We have the fusion wheel in Storm. Storm does look pretty cool, okay? It has a pretty rounded shape though, which makes it not great for attack, literally at all. And what's interesting is that it looks really different than the actual box art. This is not an issue with reproductions or fakes or whatever. This is a Takara Tomy problem. They actually changed some of their designs, especially for Pegasus. The original pre-hybrid wheel Pegasus had a different design than what actually launched. And this is the same thing here, okay? On the box, we see something a little bit more jagged, maybe even a little bit more interesting, but in actuality, they really rounded a lot of it off. And the other parts of Pegasus are what gives the Bey its true identity. We have the Pegasus energy ring, which looks really, really solid. I don't know if maybe it's because it's a reproduction, but this one seems to be a bit of a lighter blue than the ones that I have. Although those are Hasbro, so maybe they're not the same. But overall, Storm Pegasus is just one of the most classic Beyblade designs in history. And it's one of the few designs I think if you showed to a previous Beyblade fan from like 15 years ago, they'd probably be able to tell you all about it. Now let's move on to the new age with the third generation of Beyblade with Beyblade Burst. Beyblade Burst launched in 2015 in Japan with a very late 2016 launch here in the West. And this one could be kind of unpopular or really popular depending on who you ask. Beyblade Burst initially started off being kind of unpopular a little bit because it ditched the metal Beyblade designs in favor of the new burst mechanic, which is admittedly pretty awesome and still exists in the latest series of Beyblade today. And the Bey we're opening up for this video is God Valkyrie from the second season of Beyblade Burst God or Evolution. God Valkyrie was main character Vault's second Beyblade, or third if you count the manga exclusive. The second season of Beyblade Burst is where we really saw a lot of gimmicks start to come into play, and it's also a lot of people's favorite season for the entire generation. And I would kind of agree. I think that Beyblade Burst peaked towards the end of Season 2 or the beginning of Season 3. And that kind of makes me wonder, like, how rare or how expensive this bay is. Let's actually do some Googling really quick. Over $100? You're telling me this is worth over $100 new in box? The bay we're unboxing for this video is Brave Valkyrie from Beyblade Burst's 5th season, Beyblade Burst Sparking. Beyblade Burst Sparking was when the series started to kind of die down a little bit. It was still really popular here on YouTube because it was released during the infamous year of 2020, where everybody was just locked inside and you had nothing else to do. But sparking bays were quite a bit bigger, quite a bit heavier, and they also started to be more burst resistant, which is kind of the entire gimmick for the series. So let's just talk about the bay, okay? For the performance tip or the driver, we have Evolution Dash. This was an upgraded version of Evolution that released in Season 3 with Cho-Z Valkyrie. And it's fun. I mean, it's cool. It has this gimmick where you can wear down the rubber over time, which would awaken the bay. I don't really know if part wear would count as a gimmick. The next piece is pretty much 90% of the bay, and that is the 2A chassis. For Beyblade Burst Sparking, they introduced the chassis system. Some of the chassis were just kind of small little pieces that would act as like the second half of your layer. But for others, like 2A, they mixed the disc into it. So this is pretty much just the middle of the bay entirely. And it's also mostly metal and a lot of plastic, and it's gonna be like 70% of the weight of the entire bay. And then we have the main design element of the bay. We have the ring and Super King chip. The ring is called Brave, and it brings back that typical three-bladed Valkyrie shape. But there were some kind of criticisms whenever this bay first launched because the yellow rubber material was kind of more of a yellow-greenish color, which is kind of ugly. And then after that, we have the removable Super King chip, which is called Valkyrie. And this is easily one of the best, if not the best, Valkyrie centerpiece designs. I love the way you have like the Valkyrie face at the very bottom. I've always liked the way that Brave Valkyrie looked. And during a season where Takara Tomy was trying to bring back old characters and bring back old fans, they did a pretty good job. But now let's move on to the most recent Beyblade generation with Beyblade X. Beyblade X launched in July of 2023 in Japan and June of 2024 across the rest of the world. The two most major features for Beyblade X are A, the return of hard metal Beyblades, something that Metal Fight fans like myself were really hoping for, and B, the introduction of the accelerator rail. The accelerator rail, or the Extreme Line, is a ring that goes around the new X Stadium that would grip onto the Beyblade's tip, or the bits, and cause it to go sicko mode and crazy around the stadium. Beyblade X is easily the most exciting and engaging generation to battle with. And in this video, we're going to be unboxing the very first X-Bay ever released with Dran Sword. Dran Sword is another three-bladed attacker, following the example of Pegasus and Valkyrie. However, Sword is a lot more aggressive. This is another starter, meaning it's going to be coming with a launcher. And this time, Beyblade X's launchers are great, especially the winder/ripcord launcher. The amount of power you can get from this thing is insane, probably more powerful than the string launcher, although there are pros and cons. And if you want to see which launcher from Beyblade X is the best, I do have a full video on that, shameless promotion. The first part of Dran Sword we're going to look at is the tip or the bits. And we have F or flats, and it's pretty much just a flat bit that we've seen tons of times across every generation of Beyblade, but this is the very beginning of X, so it needs to start off pretty simple. And on this bit, you can see the gear innovation that grabs onto that accelerator rail, causing the bay to just go crazy. Next up, we have the Ratchet, which is 360 in this clear and blue color. And with Beyblade X, they're kind of bringing back the plastic gin and metal fight way of naming the middle pieces of the bays, where the numbers really matter. For 360, there are 3 protrusions, which is where the 3 name comes from, and 60 is the height. And finally, we have the blade itself with Dran's sword. Dran's sword is only going to come in 1 piece, unlike the previous generations having like 2 or sometimes 3, which definitely makes it worse for customization. However, because of how much metal there is, it weighs quite a bit. And the size of these bays are quite a bit smaller than Beyblade Burst as well, so they pack a lot of speed and a lot of power, which is the entire point of the entire system. It's honestly kind of insane that Beyblade has been around for over 25 years, and it's showing no signs of slowing down, with seemingly every generation being bigger than the last. And I would not be surprised if we saw Beyblades on the shelves in another 25 years.